Hello. My name is Virginia Baudet, and this is videobeaux. This is the overexposed stutter program mode. It applies a frame stutter and overexposes the video. It is almost like the file is corrupted. Jerkin 2. Gjuj. Error. I hope you enjoy. Try it out today.
This evening, I'd like to introduce our speaker to you. This is Carla Turner. Carla wears many hats. She's a special ed teacher. She is president of the Dorcas Society and lives in wonderful Quillcote over in Hollis. And she's a very talented lady. We're delighted to have Carla with us tonight. And I know that she just has lots of experience with spinning. And one of the things she said to me when I called her is that she would be delighted to do so because she was concerned that the art was being lost and that this would be one of the ways to really promote the craft. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Carla.
I'm pleased to be here. Sometimes I do a bit of a guessing game, and I'll put out all the different kind of fibers that I have spun on a side table or somewhere and ask people if they can figure it out, but they can never get it. So what I've decided to do is just distract you from what I'm doing here by passing around lots of the different fibers and things that I have made. And you can spin just about anything. If it can't jump up and run away, you can probably spin it into something. And I was on the phone with one of your members the other day and was asked if you could spin grass. And this is actually spun sweetgrass, and it's a Native American basket made in Maine in the 1800s. So I thought it would be the first thing that I'd pass around, spun grass. And I have a few things. This is Bob Carroll probably doesn't want to hear this, but he asked me if I would spin some wool from the sheep flock that he had a few years ago. And it was, I think they were Lancaster sheep, maybe. So I did, but the sheep that he had, their wool is used by weavers to make rugs. And I made this vest for my husband, which he will not wear because it is so itchy. And I made a sweater for myself that I do wear, but I have to wear 2 turtlenecks under it. It's so itchy. This is meant to be a rug. Maybe. Talk about repurposing buildings. I could repurpose that sweater. This one,
I wonder if that had the wrong material.
maybe. This is one of my treasures. I used to have a great big standard, Royal Standard poodle. And I made for a number of my nieces and nephews and grandchildren sweaters out of the poodle hair. I didn't realize how sturdy their fiber is. When this comes around, you'll be amazed how heavy this little sweater is.
Did the poodle resent that?
No, I wondered what he would do when I was spinning it, whether or not he'd poke around in the basket. He had absolutely zero interest in it, and when the kids wore the sweaters, it didn't sink into him at all. That
Did you let him grow long hair?
I let it grow really long. I let it grow to about 6 or 8 inches.
Oh, wow.
The groomer was very unhappy. I, on the other hand, was quite delighted. So that's poodle. This is our current poodle, and she's red. And that's her unspun fur. And this is her spun fur. The red in this is the poodle, and it's plied with a gray wool.
That's beautiful.
This is flax. Flax, linen. It's unspun and ready to go. You use a different spinning wheel, and you have to use water. You have a little dipping trough that you keep your fingers in it, and it really tears up your hands when you spin it. It's, but this is, I'm kind of sorry the camera's on. I used it as part of a Halloween costume one year. I have 2 of them. But one of the other things that interests me is that it really feels like plant fiber. You can tell the difference. You can tell that that's plant fiber. Yeah. I have a drum carder that's about this big around and about this wide, and it makes a bat that's about that big, and then I Z-strip it and spin it that way. But I do have hand carders that a little bit further along in my program here I'll talk about. But I am very interested in texture. And I've seen spinners whose yarn looks like it came off a machine. That doesn't interest me at all. If I want yarn that looks like it came off a machine, I'll go to Central Yarn Shop and get yarn that came off a machine. But there are people who are very interested in uniformity. My great-grandmother was from Central Nova Scotia, and this is a blanket that she spun and wove. And when I look at it, first of all, I think that weavers are a little crazy anyway because they're so into the precision of what they do. This actually has a pattern, a discernible pattern on it, but it's a blanket. It's made out of 2 strips that were the width of her loom. But just to pass this around so that people can admire the fine thread that she spun, but also the incredibly small weave. Now this is one of my treasures. This is the very first thing that I ever made from anything that I spun. And it's what made me fall in love with texture. I said, oh, that's it. That's wool, but it's from the very first wool that I ever spun. And it's at the opposite end of the scale from that one. This ball that I'm going to pass around is silk and cashmere. But one of the reasons why cashmere is so expensive is when they shear the goat, they take all the top hair with it too, and then they use a tweezer and pluck out every one of the long hairs so that they only save the fluffy undercoat. And the fluffy undercoat is just like a dust bunny. Just imagine the biggest, grayest, fluffiest dust bunny that you ever saw. And that's what cashmere is like. And it's awful to spin because there's something called the draw, and it's the distance between your 2 fingers. And one finger sets where you allow the spin to come back, and the other finger kind of prepares the yarn behind it. So I can be way back here. But when you have cashmere and the fiber is so short, the draw is about 1/4 of an inch. And if you get further away from that, it breaks. So not only is it a pain, but it's also why it's so expensive. Cashmere sweaters pill. They get the little balls of wool that get on things. Those pills are from the short fibers of the whatever the hair that you've got. And so they come out, ball themselves up, and then you've got these little balls. cashmere sweaters pill a lot because their fiber is so short. This is mohair. Mohair is from a goat. Mohair is one of my favorites to spin. This gray one coming around is husky. This one's Siberian husky.
This is what again?
Siberian husky. And this one, and if you look at the ones with silk, you can see that they have a much higher luster. This, the ivory one in this is silk with a regular brown sheep. And for any beginning spinner, this is the very first ball of yarn I ever spun. It took me about 2 years to do it. And you can see that trying to get it together. When you do a light and a dark like that, it's called rag. That's like this. I like to do it just because it's sort of interesting, and because I'm much more interested in texture than color. The only way I'm ever going to get any color in anything that I spin is to ply it with something. I did dye once. That was my one foray into dyeing. I thought it was a great color, but I like the natural colors. Here's an all brown. Here's the tan. Had plenty of gray. And one of these days, this is horsehair. Yep. And one of these days, I'm just going to spin it out just to say I've done it. It feels just like the flax. This is alpaca. And everybody's going to like this. Yep. The alpaca, I think, is nicer than cashmere. Okay, I have a little fantasy that I will sit here and, well, maybe I'll start with this. This is the hand cards. And what you do, this is called dressing.
Now, this wool that's in the bag, wool that's in the bag, that's just
Yep.
been sheared off the sheep? There's nothing been done to it?
Okay, I'll start at the beginning.
Thank you.
First, you feed the sheep. And you try and keep the sheep clean. I always put a little jacket on my sheep so that you don't get shavings and seeds and hay and any other kind of debris that, if a sheep can find something to get into, it will. And then you shear the sheep, which is everybody's three-ring circus. There are a few people who are really, really good at it, and the rest of the world is just awful. And, you know, the sheep rolls over, and the sheep stands up, and the sheep runs away, and you know, it's craziness. Then you've got the fleece. And in theory, you try to get the fleece so that when you lay it on the ground, it still looks like a sheep. And then you do what you call skirting. And you go around skirting. And you take the edge off. It's basically the belly hair and all the fur from around the tail end and around the feet, all the dirty, dirty parts, and you just dispose of that. It makes good garden mulch. And then what I do is I stuff the whole fleece into my washing machine full of hot water.
In a bag?
Nope, loose. And I use regular laundry detergent. The trick is you can't let it agitate. If you let it agitate, it all felts together and you have one big wob of fleece you can never do anything else with. Maybe if you're lucky you could make some kind of sculptural art with it. Anyway.
That's a different talk.
That's a different talk. Put it in the wash machine, the hottest water, with a regular laundry soap, and it will take out all the crud. And you just let it sit there for 15 or 20 minutes, spin it out, Then you have to reset to wash and fill the wash machine up again with hot water. What felt sweaters and shrinks wool is the switch between hot and cold. As long as you wash it, any sweater you want to, if you wash it in hot water, as long as you rinse it in water that's the same temperature, you won't have too much trouble. It's that. And when you, the other talk is felting, but if you ever want to felt, you knit a pair of mittens and switch them back and forth between hot and cold water, and they'll shrink right up nice and tight, and you'll have felted mittens, or hats, or purses, or any other thing you want to make about felt. But that's felt. But after I spin it out in my washing machine, and you've got to be careful. You've got to stand right there when that rinse water's running in, because if it starts to agitate, I mean, you've got to be right there to slam it off. And I took a big wooden spoon and kind of stir it around a little bit, let it spin out, and then I take it out in my hammock. And while it's still wet, I tease it. I pull it apart like this so that it's all loosey-goosey. And it just sits out there in the hammock. Sometimes I clothespin like a sheer curtain over the top of the string hammock. And in a few hours, it's dry. Then I put it in a bag like this, and I have 6 or 7 bags like this at home. And I usually use my drum carder. Carding is the part about spinning that I like the least. It's tedious, and the only time I ever use my carders, my hand carders, is in a demonstration, because this is the way that people used to do it. And you just keep adding an extra layer. I do go into the fine crafts class at the high school, and once a quarter, the kids have to find somebody who will come in and do some kind of a demonstration. And they're always very interested. So you end up, this is, people who are really good at this then do something. They do. They peel it off with the other carder, which I can't do. And you basically end up with a little rectangle, and you kind of roll it together. Yeah. So, and that's what you spin. So, you end up with some version of yarn ready to spin.
Would you explain your spinning wheel a little bit? What the parts are?
I don't know if I can. This is an Ashford wheel. It's from Australia. And it's called an upright. Older wheels, more traditional wheels, the wheel goes the other way. The 2 spindles down on the floor, it's called the Lazy Kate, and it's for plying. And you essentially put 2, ideally full, spindles down there, and then you spin the other way. If you plied the same direction that you spun, it would come unspun. as you spin along, the reason I have the sheet on the floor is because all sorts of flotsam falls out of the wool, even after it's been washed and carded and, you know, had every other thing done to it. You think it looks pretty good, but even just sitting here, I have a fairly noticeable pile of dust down there, and I just came across a seed.
Oh, a seed.
Or, you know, a piece of hay or a piece of whatever. If it can actually kind of grab it, I just stick it in there and.
What's the, go ahead, you're spinning wool.
I'm spinning wool, yeah.
So what is in that little bag? I see something metal.
It's my oil can. It's my itty bitty oil can. No? They really do squeak and tweak, and it's got 4 or 5 different places that like to be oiled. I haven't.
Can I ask a basic question? How is the thread that you're holding?
Right. Let me just turn it. It's going in here, coming out here, and this is spinning separate from this.
See where the thread comes from.
Is he putting that on the camera?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
These 2 pieces spin separately. And the wheel spins the spindle in the middle,
The spindles, this little circle spins separately from the.
from the box
from the
outside,
frame.
yeah.
Huh.
And if I was really good, I'd tell you all the names of all the different parts of the spinning wheel.
Did you get that on camera?
How does it,
Just explain.
how does it move on the different, does it move on those different hooks that's on that frame?
It does. And when I've been spinning a lot, I get on benders where I'll spend 4 or 5 hours a day. If I've got a project to do, and I can actually pause my spinning wheel while I'm spinning it and make it hop from one hook to the next. But I can't, in all honesty, I haven't sat down at my spinning wheel for quite a number of months.
Just to fill the spindle a little.
Evenly.
Yeah, evenly.
Yep.
Now, if you were to spin the wheel unevenly, does that matter?
It does a little bit. I'm spinning clockwise because I ply counterclockwise.
Because you what, counterclockwise?
I ply when I put 2 together.
Oh, ply,
Yep. You know, like you got
like 2 ply.
2 ply or 4 ply. Yep. No, like yarn.
One way and doing one
Fiber the other.
way so that they connect.
It's right.
Two spun threads together.
You have to go the other way, because if you don't go the other way, you unspin it.
It unspins it.
So, does it make a difference what size the spinning wheel is for what you want to spin?
It does if you don't have a big opening. When the orifice is really small, you have to spin a small thread.
So like cashmere?
Yeah, well, anything. Like I can spin this.
Oh, you can make it smaller.
See how thin that is? But if you want to spin anything with texture, for me, if I spin very long, it starts to get really even, and I
So you want
like a
texture,
quacking duck.
create texture by making some a little thicker or some a little thinner?
I let it do it itself. There is a technique called slubbing, and there's a slub right there, that little fat part. There are people who, when they spin every 4 inches or every 6 inches or every 2 inches, they make a slub. I'm not that organized.
You let it come natural.
No, I just let it do its thing. And if I notice that I'm starting to spin really evenly, I'll talk to somebody on the phone while I'm doing it. I'll watch television. I'll do something else at the same time, because otherwise I end up with,
You don't want it right.
yeah, I don't. because I like this textured look. Right. Periodically, you have to adjust the tension because
And that's adjusting the tension on the thread, on the yarn,
it's
or on the spindle?
good question. It's adjusting the rate that the fly goes around. Because it wasn't, I was spinning too fast and it wasn't drawing in fast enough. So I was getting overspin. It's too spun and then it kind of kinks back on itself. If it's not too awful, when you ply, you can fix that a little bit. You can unspin it a little bit. You can put some tension on it before it goes in so that it doesn't have a little built-in knot.
Is there some reason that you chose a more modern wheel as opposed to an old one? Does this have advantages to the old ones?
I was worried when I was a beginning spinner that I might not find any other spinners. And I was afraid if anything went wrong with my wheel, I wouldn't have a resource to help me. Because when I started, I only knew one other person who spun. And I just was determined to kind of make it up on my own if I had to.
So why did you stop putting yarn on there?
Because I want to show you all of the process. And in order to do that, I spun roughly what I thought would be enough to ply with what I had on that other spindle. Because there are 2 or 3 more steps to go. And you were asking how to get it started. Because the orifice on my wheel is so big, I can stick my little finger in there. Some machines, you need a special little hook.
Now we know what to do with Croco.
I just sit around and spin.
Yeah.
So you just did a little knot in there.
I did. I didn't care about anything except getting it attached.
Now what are you using? Are you using wool to ply? Using both wool? Or?
Yep, it's the same. Pass one each way.
That's the string you have over here, it's just keep the wheel together, right?
This string?
Yeah.
This string actually is the drive belt.
Oh, okay.
And when I treadle,
Okay.
it drives this wheel. And then this drive belt turns the spindle.
Oh, okay.
If I sit here long enough, I'm actually going to remember the names of all these parts. All right,
Because that piece is not attached to what you're working on.
what isn't?
It's just the
Two
drive
ply.
belt is not attached to what you're working on.
No, it
See,
isn't.
that's why I couldn't figure out how she got all this on. Okay, now I understand. Yeah, I was talking about yarn. I didn't really
Yep.
just not go around this.
I'm going to reverse, and I've also just noticed, that I need to adjust the nut because,
It's wobbling.
yeah,
Oh, you just started going in there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just run by the.
What she's got here.
I think it's a flat wheel, but I don't know the spindle. So you can get reproduction spindles for the old wheels.
Yep.
I'll have to take you over and see if you can tell me what size. How to figure this out. Figure out how to get one. 'Cause I really like to have it. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Except it's not drawing in, and this is a really bad time for it not to draw in.
when you sent out, or just when you did yourself?
I see what the problem is.
She only sends out.
I send out the fleece, and it comes back like this.
Is that expensive to have that done?
No. Well, I mean, spinning isn't the way to get cheap yarn. By the time you've fed the sheep, spent all the time to card it, wash it, dry it. I had a coworker at the high school who's was a chemistry teacher, and she was also a spinner. And her yarn was absolutely gorgeous, just gorgeous. But it was so perfect. It looked like it was machine made, yeah. That's what you call serious control.
Now, Carla,
Yep.
you're just holding, as you're putting the two plies together,
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out how your hands are, okay, just like that, and then keeping your finger between.
Yep.
Just controlling the tension of it.
I'm controlling how much spin goes into it. Yeah. What's really funny is if you look at the 4 finished 2-ply gray skeins there, one of them I didn't do at the same time, and it looks a little bit different. For me, I need to maintain contact with the fiber, I guess, until I'm done, because otherwise my tension changes, the rate that I spin at changes, the thickness of the yarn. I think it's more or less about the same, and then the next thing I know, it's completely different.
Now, why are you changing the position on the hooks? Of the yarn? I know you started on like the 4th one and you've been moving it up.
So that it will just fill evenly.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah.
It's not like a bobbin.
It will fall over if it gets too high, and then you've got kind of a little glitchy spot in it.
So this was a household tool until when?
Well, the Industrial Revolution kind of put the skids to the requirement that people spin.
Do you know of any male spinners?
Actually, in Scotland, lots of the best spinners were men. Almost all of the weavers were men. This is a nitty-nutty.
Nitty naughty. I have one
Yep.
of those, but I didn't know what it was.
And it,
You better label it before you forget.
Do you know the little nitty naughty verse? It's a little song. Nitty naughty. Nitty naughty. I wish I had thought. It darling. It talks about how many skeins you're making or something.
it's a measurement.
It's like a measuring song.
And this one's 18 inches long. So when I wrap around it, 1 revolution, it's a yard. So if you were to open any of these, and that's how it comes off, and just counted the number of threads, it would tell you how many yards were in this skein.
That's what the nitty naughty is.
And I have an itty bitty nitty. But this one is meant for if you are spinning silk thread for the purpose of sewing or embroidery or something. And it's some very fine, delicate piece. You would just use a little, and you'd only be spinning, I don't know what that is, a foot on each one. So I can pass it around. Yeah.
Now, how does the silk,
Well, that's
how do
almost
you
the
decide, I
size.
guess, silk goes
It is. Yep.
Isn't that almost the size of embroidery thread when you
Yep. Yep.
comes about?
This is also kind of a fun thing. This is a drop spindle. Can you drop spindle? You know a lot about this. I've been listening to you the whole time.
We have a daughter who spins and sits through what would otherwise be interminable meetings and conferences with a drop spindle. But her spinning looks like machine spinning. 'Cause she
Well,
does so
she's perfect. The story on the drop spindle basically follows along the old adage that women's work is never done. So when women would tie up their apron, a colonial-sized long apron, they would bring up the bottom and hook it in the waist, and they would fill it up with roving. And they would be little ones like this.
You call
because
this roving?
Roving, yeah. This is roving. This is a rolog. It's just a little piece of wool ready to spin. And they would lay them inside their apron, and as they walked to go bring in the sheep or to go wherever it was they were going to walk, they would walk along and they would spin. And I can't do it. The idea is you somehow magically go along and it keeps spinning and it spins what you've got in your hand, and then you pick it up and you wrap it around here. Oops. And part of my problem is I've just noticed that it's out of sync with itself. That might help. And then you essentially turn it again, and it drops down in some magical way that works. And then you pick it up again, and you wrap the yarn around.
It's like
and
a yo-yo.
it is like a yo-yo.
Spinning
And
itself.
people who can do it are wonderful. I can't do it.
Yo-yo spin.
not have the touch.
But back to the big nitty-notty. Nitty-notty. Mm-hmm.
My imagination that pop goes the weasel came from the spinning process.
I think you're right.
Because you said
What did you
pop,
say, Pat?
well, I heard her say pop, something about it pop, and then I heard that pop goes the weasel came from something popping and something about spinning, but I need it clarified.
There are lots of little ditties about spinning, lots of references. I mean, everybody knows the Ba Ba Black Sheep Have You Any Wool one, but there are lots of other ones too. And they were little songs or poems that women entertained their children with while they were engaged in the process one way or another.
Like when you play cat's cradle, isn't it?
A little bit, and when it goes haywire, it's not pretty.
You're putting a lot of tension on that.
I am putting a lot of tension on it. In fact, you'll notice that one end of my nitty-notty is much newer than the other end. I did.
And you actually got a replacement part for it.
I have a cousin who is a woodworker, and he figured it out. Now, the reason for the nitty-notty is that it sets the ply.
Sets the fly.
The ply. You know, it's a little bit like putting your hair on rollers.
Fly. That's the fly.
4 ply, 2 ply,
Okay,
6 ply.
but you don't have to get it wet.
You don't have to get it wet. But you have to stretch it so that it really sits on the nitty-notty. And normally I do 100 yard skeins. Now, don't ask me how I know that. But when I fill up 2 spindles, it comes out to be 100 yards. So,
How many yards do you need for a typical sweater?
it depends on how thick the yarn is. I actually have a little gauge that will convert a pattern from skeins to yards to sizes. Ideally, that would sit for a couple of days. Then I pull it off, and I've got one of these. You know, when you wind yarn in a ball like that, it's very uneven tension on it, and especially a hand-spun yarn will get puffy spots in it. Now, for anybody who this little flotsam blowing off it in my face. For anybody who knits, Lopi yarn, which is from Iceland.
Oh, is that the one you can pull and it pulls?
It's not spun.
Oh, okay.
It's a really thin roll-log.
Yeah, it's like old spot, because I mean,
Right out. So when you knit and
So Carla, after you wash it, you put it up on that little clothes dryer thing?
no, I hang it.
On the hammock?
No, I hang it on a hook out on the side of the barn.
So you have to have a hook and you have to have a hook.
That's it. That's why this the whole thing is dying out. But what I did want to say is that lately there really has been a resurgence. It used to be you'd go to Common Ground Fair and you'd see a half a dozen people doing spinning demonstrations. Now they're all over the place. And if you go on and you go Google Maine spinning groups, you could probably find a group that meets every day of the week that has between 3 and 20 spinners in the group who spin on a regular basis. Yep. And for years and years and years, I spun every Friday afternoon with a couple of friends. The real ticket.
who was the ingenious character who first built a knitting knot?
I don't know, but it's a very long time ago. Because if you look, you'll see in medieval pictures, you'll see niddy noddy. It drives me crazy when I go to some colonial restoration place and they've got a spinning arrangement set up and it's all backwards. It's like no spinner would have it arranged the way they have it arranged.
You feel like going over there and like moving
And I was like, would you mind if I just, oh no, we can't have anybody touch the exhibit. You know, it's like, okay, but it's wrong. So that's basically from sheep to carding to spinning to plying to setting the ply to making a skein. That's how you do it. To sweater. To
Talk
sweater.
about that sweater.
This is my not black sheep. Part of the reason why we had 17 sheep was I kept trying to get a black lamb. And I would find the coal black ram and breed them to my brown sheep. And I would get brown lambs. And lots of brown lambs. I had really dark brown lambs, but mostly I had light brown lambs. And this sheep from our barn.